really love this song. I love that song. I chose it. That's the way it works. So I'm really happy to be here. How did you think I was going to start this? You know what? We've got 35 minutes together today, and that is it. And you need to be kind of back in that mode where you are really kind of focused on what I think is a wonderful, wonderful topic. So I'm going to do, and I apologize ahead of time, I'm going to do one of those kind of dorky training things. Can you stand up just really, really quick? Stand up. It's after lunch, and that's just not going to do. All of you guys know this. You know this extremely well, right? Where your body is, your brain is. So at least stand up, put both of your hands in the air, turn to somebody that you don't know, and please give them a high five. Go ahead, turn around. All right, good. Awesome. Sit down. You passed the first test. And I also want to give a little positive, again, note that, a little positive reinforcement to you guys. You guys made it all the way through a conference. Who does that? The high potentials and the high performers do. That's who. So that is really awesome. And you actually made it to the very last presentation. So that is awesome. Thank you very, very much. My mom is going to be really proud of me. So I'm so glad that you guys are here. So my name is Don Sandel, and I am going to spend the rest of our time together making the indelible, science-based, irrefutable link between happiness, optimism, and positivity. And by the way, I'm going to link those together for the purposes of this conversation. I know that those are distinct words, but I'm going to link those together because I'm taking what is basically a full-day workshop and 25 years of research, and I'm shoving it into 30 minutes. So I'm just going to put those words together, okay? And I'm going to make the link to higher performance, okay? So that is what we're going to focus on. I'd like to begin, though, with really quick, I'd like to take a very, very scientific poll. So by show of hands, how many of you have as a general life goal to be happy? You have a general life goal to be happy. Now, because you're executive coaches, leadership development folks, talent folks, you know what my follow-up question is. If you have that as a general life goal, how many of you have it written down in an action plan, a development plan, or somewhere in an IDP somewhere? Yeah. So for those of you that do, there's extra coffee. So part of what we're going to be talking about today is the importance of intention with regard to this, okay? So, and that actually reminds me of a lottery joke, right? We have a goal, but we don't have anything behind it. So, do you guys know the lottery joke? Okay, so the lottery joke. Guy prays to God, and he says, God, help me win the lottery. And God says, yes, son, I'm going to help you win the lottery. So weeks go by, and months go by, and he doesn't win the lottery. And he turns back up to God, and he says, God, I thought you were going to help me win the lottery. And God strikes down in a lightning bolt, and he says, you got to play the lottery. That's the part where you laugh. So we actually begin with Copernicus back in the 15th century, who was looking at the heavens, and he said, we're doing something wrong. We need a paradigm shift. He said that the planets aren't revolving around the Earth. Planets are revolving around the sun. He said, we need a paradigm shift. We're doing this all wrong. Well, in our own universe, we need a paradigm shift as well. We're doing it all wrong, right? I'm not going to be happy until finish the project, get the raise, get the promotion, marry the perfect spouse. I got the big house in the suburbs. I get the shiny new car. I'm not going to be happy when, right? Well, we've been following the disease model in modern science, right? The disease model is this. If there's something broke, we will fix it. If there's a melody, we will fix it. If there's something pathological, we will fix it, right? That's the disease model. But a guy in 1998 named Dr. Martin Seligman said, wait. I don't know if he actually said that, but he said something to the effect. He said, wait, why don't we study when it's going right? Why don't we study happiness, optimism, and positivity? Why don't we study when people are thriving? Why don't we study from flourishing? I think we can learn from that. So today's presentation is really a summary of that 25 years that basically said this, that happiness precedes success. In fact, happiness causes success. That is what all the research in the last 25 years says. So it must be so. In fact, our brains literally change when we're happy, optimistic, and positive. Our brains literally change when we're happy, optimistic, and positive. And we're going to talk about that, and we're going to show that in a little bit. So how many of you, when you signed up for this conference, said, boy, I hope at some point somebody tells me more about nuns? Well, here's your moment, okay? So there is a great classic study in positive psychology, and they use nuns, right, because it's the perfect controlled environment. They all live in the same place and eat the same foods and sing the same hymns and hang out with the same people, right? And a lot of them have the same habits. Just going to let that one sit out there for a second. What a perfect controlled environment. So in the turn of the century, what nuns would do is they would write these long, expansive autobiographies. And what the researchers did is they took all of their writings and they took their autobiographies and they put them into 4 distinct piles, right? So they put the really negative ones over here. And I know some of you are having a visceral reaction to this image up here. Hang in there. It's almost over. So they took all the negative sentences and put them over here, and then they put the really positive ones over here, and somewhere in between, they put them over here. And so they looked at the writings, and it was fascinating what they ended up finding out. So for every 1% increase in the number of positive sentences in their writing, there is a 1.4% decrease in their mortality rate. So they studied the writings, and they put them in the different piles and said, this is what comes out of this. The happiest nuns lived 10 years longer. By age 80, they had only lost 25% of their population. By age 80, the least happiest nuns had lost 60% of its population. The happiest nuns had an 80% chance of getting to 85. The least happy nuns had only a 54% chance. By age 90, survived 65% of the time. The least happy nuns only survived 30% of the time. 54% of the happy nuns reached 94. Only 15% of the least happy nuns. Based on the science, this is not a nice to do. This is a have to do from a well-being perspective, from an engagement perspective, but also from a performance perspective. Oh my God, I am so sorry I am showing this slide. If I knew that every presenter here was going to be talking about the VUCA environment, I would have come up with my own acronym, okay? But you guys know this is so. We are bombarded right now with the data and information, and we're bombarded with change. I'm going to move on. I think we got that one. But here's the challenge. Here's the challenge, and here's the reality, and this is why this is relevant, right? From Gallup, 70% of our employees are not engaged. 21% responded and said, I'm not being motivated by my manager. And the one that scares me perhaps the most is this last one, 50% report that stress is high or overwhelming. Now think about your own life, your own existence. How effective are you in overwhelming stress? A little bit of stress pushes you, but overwhelming stress, not effective. That one worries me. How about this one from Harvard? Stress-related health problems are responsible for up to 80% of visits to the doctor and account for third highest healthcare expenditures behind only heart disease and cancer. That's stress. And you guys are living that. We are living that. But there is hope, or HOP. Happiness, optimism, and positivity. When you're happy and optimistic and positive, there's a 12 to 16% increase in productivity at least. I've seen actually higher in some reports. The positive, the happy, the optimistic are 85% more efficient at their work and 10 times less likely to take sick leave. Now, this is a great study. This is from the seminal study in positive psychology from Dr. Sonia Lyubomirsky. Say that really fast. Sonia Lyubomirsky out of University of California, Riverside. And this is what she did. She did a meta-analysis, which is the study of other studies. And she studied all of these other studies, up to 225 of them. Up to 300,000 participants in these studies. And she determined that, in fact, happiness does precede excess. Happiness does cause success. Here's a couple of details. The happy, the optimistic, and the positive make more money. We're better leaders. This is important. They're likely to have more fulfilling marriages. They have more friends. They're more philanthropic. They cope better with stress and trauma. From a resilience perspective, that we've heard from the last 2 days, from a resilience perspective, the fact that we can cope better with stress and trauma is really, really key. And we perform better at work. Our brains are literally different when we're happy, optimistic, and positive. We focus better. We're more disciplined. We're more creative. We're more innovative. We're able to leverage the resources in our brain, and we open up the learning centers in our brain when we're happy, optimistic, and positive. This is not a nice to do. This is not a nice to do. I think it's a have to do. Happiness and positivity improve our health. I think we know this intuitively, but I also think we need to be reminded about this. So we all have stress, and we all ruminate, right? And so what we do when we ruminate is, one, we are wasting time. But when we're under this incredible amount of stress, right, we have an increased blood flow that goes into the heart. Right? So we have this increased blood flow that goes into the heart. We get a release of cortisol and adrenaline. We have this increased blood flow. So when we have the increased blood flow that goes into the arteries in the heart, what does the brain say? The brain says, oh, I need to protect those arteries. So what does it do then? Releases plaque. Now, if we're under stress week after week and month after month and year after year, we know what happens. That's a heart attack waiting to happen. Here's the other interesting thing that happens in stress. So the brain is a little bit binary. So the brain says, oh, I've released the cortisol. I need to stop producing something else. You know what it stops producing? White blood cells. White blood cells are key to our immune system. How many of you can track back the last couple of years when you got sick, and was it preceded by lots of stress? Right? I see a lot of you shaking your heads. That stress is not going away, right? This VUCA world, sorry to say that word again, but this VUCA world is not going away, so it's how we manage and respond to stress that is going to be our key. That is going to be our difference maker, not the fact that somehow we try to mitigate the stress out there, because that's not going to work and it's not going to go away. All right, so after I've really depressed you, I find that rather ironic in such a titled presentation, this is what I want to do. So psychologists call this a primer, right? So there's a stimulus and there's a response. And so there's going to be a stimulus, and then we'll take a look at the response. So a little background on this minute 28-second wonderful commercial from Coca-Cola. So what they decided to do is they hired this guy with this infectious laugh. And they said, go on a subway in Antwerp, Belgium, and just start laughing, and we're going to film it. So many of you may have seen this, but this is really a wonderful, wonderful video. So guys in the back, go ahead and play the video. Can we give the folks at Coca-Cola a little bit of props for that one? Better yet, at some point, buy a Coke product in the next couple of weeks or something. But I love that. That makes me smile every day. And I looked out at the audience, and most of you were smiling. Some of you were laughing. I've done this where I've seen tears. And the tears are okay because I cried during beer commercials. How can they waste that beer? So something fascinating happened inside the brain, okay? I want to talk about how we changed the neural structure in our brain. So the brain is this fascinating thing, right? It's about the size of a softball, shaped more like a football. The brain is made up of 86 billion neurons, and each one of those neurons can make at least 5,000 other connections. The average brain weighs about 3 pounds, but I've met a lot of you. I'd say the group in here, maybe 3'2", 3'3". How's that for transparent pandering? So the brain takes up about 2% of our body mass, eats up about 20% of our energy. The brain survives on glucose and oxygen, right? And the brain is responsible for just about everything, including our feelings of happiness. So let's talk about that for a second. So while you watched this, you felt happy. You weren't happy because you were happy. You were happy because there was a release of neurotransmitters that made you feel good. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into this, but this is actually fun. So let me share this with you really briefly. So while you watched this and you felt good because you got a release of neurotransmitters. Okay, that is why you felt good. So you watched that and you laughed. Now, if you ever Googled neurotransmitter, the first one that's going to come up is dopamine, right? It's like the Kim Kardashian of neurotransmitters. So that's the first one that's going to come up. And dopamine makes you feel good, but it is this great reinforcing productivity cycle that is dopamine. Because as you get closer to a goal, you're working on your project and you're getting closer to it, you get a release of dopamine to push you over the finish line. And when you get to the finish line, you get another release of dopamine. That is kind of the brain's way of saying, yeah, keep going. Here's some energy, keep going. We need that. We need dopamine. The next one is oxytocin. Oxytocin is the relationship neurotransmitter or the trust neurotransmitter. Early humankind, the only way that early humankind, our ancestors, ended up surviving is they ended up forming groups, right? And when they formed groups, there was this release of oxytocin. It's the relationship neurotransmitter. If you're with somebody that you love, you get a release of oxytocin. That's that feel good. It's also the trust neurotransmitter. When somebody meets or exceeds your expectation, it's the trust neurotransmitter. You get a release of oxytocin. Okay? Another reason you might feel good is you get a release of serotonin. Serotonin's really interesting. Let's do a quick exercise. We'll do a really, really quick exercise. I want you to think about a time when you did it, you nailed it, you were awesome, you felt really proud about something that you had done. Now, don't just say you're doing it. I want you to really get back there to that moment about something that you did, and you nailed it, and you did it. And if you don't have something, copy off your neighbor. Now, did you feel that pride again? When you thought about something that you had accomplished in the past, that feeling of pride again is serotonin. You're welcome. So when you get the release of serotonin, there's another way that you can get this. This one I actually love is you walk outside and it's a beautiful sunny day and you go, oh my God, I feel ebullient. Yeah, I said ebullient. You ever done that? You stepped outside and it's a sunny day and all of a sudden you got this rush of feel good? That's serotonin. Now endorphins are interesting. Endorphins are more of a hormone and it's really self-created and self-produced morphine. So the only way that you're going to get a release of endorphins is when you overdid it. You worked out and you really broke down a muscle group. The brain's going to go, you overdid it, let me release a little, this will make you feel better, right? Or you're running and you pull a hammy and the brain goes, okay, I'm going to do a little treat for you. You're going to get a little endorphin. I love this one at the office, though. Everybody has this happen at the office. Somebody announces, I don't know why they want to announce to us, but they announce, I'm going to go for a walk. So they go for their walk, and they come back, and they're feeling really pretty good after their walk. And they go, I can just feel those endorphins. I love that. Unless they really pulled a hammy or snapped an ankle or did 100 push-ups while they were out there, they didn't feel endorphins. Endorphins make you feel good. It's self-produced morphine, but then, man, you got to really overdo it. So have you ever said, man, I just need a really good cry? Girls, don't answer. I want to hear from the guys. Have you ever said, I really want a good cry, and you feel good after a cry? Yeah, that's endorphins. That's endorphins. So the brain literally changes, okay? So we get these release, we get these feel good, we feel good. The brain literally changes. It opens up the learning centers of the brain, which leads to higher performance. So it's really been interesting during the last day or so as a number of presenters talking about gratitude. And I love this, and that's awesome. So here's the reason why, though, and this is why this is really powerful. Our brains, your brains, because of evolution, because of early humankind, has a negativity bias, right? Your brain has a negativity bias no matter how positive you are. That is evolution. Early humankind was always scanning for what? Was always scanning for danger, right? It was better to miss lunch than be lunch. And that part of evolution hasn't changed. We still default to the negative way too much, but we still default to the negative. When something negative happens, the brain goes, oh, I can learn from that. Let me put that into long-term memory. When something positive happens, the brain goes, I really can't learn from that. Gone. Which is why in my workshop, I have an 8-hour workshop, and I do a savoring exercise. I said, you got to change that negativity bias. You got to savor your positive moments more and change that genetic code that says we have this negativity bias. Now, the number one intervention for raising happiness scores is gratitude. The number one intervention for raising our happiness scores is gratitude. So let's begin changing our neural structure right now, combating the effects of evolutionary imposed negativity bias. So you all have a pen, you all have somewhere to write, and I want you to actually write this down. We learn better when we write it down. Our brains appreciate that process, and it goes into long-term memory. You know where I'm going. Very easy assignment. Let's just take a couple of seconds. I want you to think of something that you're grateful for. 3 things. One of them needs to be a person. My last name is Sandel. 3 things. One of them needs to be a person. Write that down. One, Lubomirsky advises this, and she's done a number of studies, but she says, don't do this every day. Do this every couple of days. And what you do is you change you create a new neural map in your brain. You change the neural structure in your brain from defaulting to the negative. And if you do this every couple of days for about 30, 45 days, your brain starts to go, oh, I'm supposed to look for things to be grateful for. I'm supposed to look for the positive. That's how we begin changing our neural structure and defaulting to the positive, not the negative. I think it's very, very powerful. And find your own primer for that, right? The primer is something that is a stimulus and there's a response. What's your primer? A certain stop sign, a certain street, a certain bridge that you drive under. Okay, what's your primer to spark your brain to go, okay, that's right, I'm not ruminating right now, I'm gonna think the positive. I'm gonna think about people and things that I'm grateful for. And I know darn well where some of you are at. You go, this is really hokey. Okay. It's all right. But this is also getting to the neural structure in your brain, creating a new neural map, and your brain can change to the day that you die. Don't believe it that it can't. Your brain, during the course of this conversation, has already changed. And for some of you, for the better. Now, we all have self-limiting beliefs. I know there's a lot of coaches in here, and what do coaches do? And you guys are wonderful at doing this. You're getting at beliefs. But the biggest obstacles that are in our way are the ones that are self-imposed, are the ones that we put there. This is such a perfect example of that, the fact that we have this infinite ability to fool ourselves. So in the 40s and 50s, science said that if man broke the 4-minute mile, he would die. I'm not trying to be melodramatic, that's what they said. Man, if he breaks the 4-minute mile, he will die. Nobody broke the 4-minute mile until 1954. Roger Bannister from the UK broke the 4-minute mile. Here's a fascinating example of how we put our own obstacles in the way, self-limiting beliefs, because in the next 13 months, 6 other people broke the 4-minute mile. They gave themselves permission. What are your beliefs that hold you back in terms of trying to focus on happy, optimistic, and positive? So great, Don. You've brought up some interesting science, and I'm going to share my email in a moment. And if there is any research of these studies that I can share with you, please, please, please reach out to me. I would love to be able to help you. So I'm going to go 3, 2, 1, and I've got just a couple minutes, so I'm going to go through this really, really fast. We have the ability to metacognate, which means that we can think about our thinking. The animals can't do that. We can. So we have the ability to metacognate, think about our thinking, and combat that negativity bias. Do the savor exercise. Do the gratitude exercise. Find a primer for you that says, I need to stop ruminating and put myself in a better mood. Dispute the negative thinking, right? Replace it with the positive. And surround ourselves. I used to be pretty aggressive with this one. And I thought about it, and I used to tell people, look, share with them the research, share with them the science, share that the brain literally changes and we perform at a higher level in every domain of our life. We perform better in every domain of our life when we're happy, optimistic, and positive. That's the last 25 years of research. If there's somebody around you who is really negative, don't point. But if there's somebody around you who is really negative, I used to say, get rid of them. But you know what? Sometimes we still love the people that are really negative. But the whole idea is surround yourself with positivity. Help people understand. You know, you just went to the negative right there. Sleep. There is huge studies out there now about sleep. The power of sleep. I don't think we should underestimate this, and it really affects our brains. So when we sleep, of course, the brain is still working, right? In fact, while we're sleeping, our brains are solving the day's problems. It's fascinating. Have you ever woken up and you're in the shower, and you've got shampoo, and you're shampooing your hair, and all of a sudden you get this great idea, and you go, oh, this shampoo is awesome. It's got coconut oil. It must be good for the brain. No, it's because your brain was solving the day's problems, and you woke up, and your brain goes, here you go. The other thing about sleep that is really fascinating is that the brain cleanses itself every single night. We get spinal fluid, and it goes through the cerebral cortex, and it cleans out all of the toxins, and it cleans out all of the dead neurons. Okay? Does that every night with spinal fluid, goes through the cerebral cortex. Guess how long that takes? Yeah, about 7 to 9 hours. So when Mom said, you really need to get more sleep, honey, Mom was right. 7 to 9 hours, right? It allows the brain, and it also consolidates learning. So let's go to cortisol. Cortisol is catabolic, which means it destroys the molecules in all of your organs. And cortisol is the stress hormone. You're under stress, we get a release of cortisol. But what if we're doing that all day? What if we're doing that all week? What if we're doing that all month? Cortisol is slowly killing us. And again, I don't mean to be melodramatic, but that's what it does. So cortisol, the number one way to get rid of cortisol is exercise. The number one way, and if you guys did college the way that I did college, I was really glad to find this out, that we can create new neurons. Exercise is the number one way to create new neurons. So keep exercising, and that ain't about vanity. That's about our health. That's about our brains, right? Okay, so number one, positivity is a contagion. Lead with it. This is for leaders, and I work with leaders all the time, and we've embedded this type of work into a number of our curricula. So Christakis from Harvard did this study, and he did a contagion study. So first he was studying obesity, and then he was studying smoking. So with the smoking study, this is what he did. He said, based on my research, the person who's closest to the smoker has an increased chance, 25%, to now be a smoker. And the person standing next to that person has a 15% increased chance. And the person standing closest to that person has a 10% increased chance. And the person at the end, 4 out. That's how you got to be bringing your best self to work. So they did the same study, and they did the same study around positivity and happiness and optimism. And the numbers were about the same. If you're a leader, you got to bring your best self to work, right? You are the model. Your team will mirror the self that you bring to work. Are you bringing the most happy, the most optimistic, the most positive? So, you guys know the soup face story? Of course you don't. It's my story. So my dear friend, Ken and Paula, take Ken's mom out to lunch every week, and they go to the same restaurant. And when they walk into the restaurant, they pass the chalkboard that tells the soup of the day. Cream of broccoli, whatever it is. So they go and they sit down at the same booth, same waitress. And what do you think Ken's mom, when they sit down, what do you think the first thing she says to the waitress is? What's the soup of the day? And she likes soup. But she has the same response every single time. Ooh. She has a neuromap in her head. She has a habit that defaults to the negative. She likes the soup. She still orders the soup. But ooh. Metaphorically, we all have that. Metaphorically, we all have that somewhere in our lives where we default to the negative and we don't even think about it. It's involuntary. What the hell are we doing? We need to stop and think. This isn't a nice to do, although it's nice to do. But the brain literally changes when we're happy, optimistic, and positive. I'm going to leave you with this. So I've got 0 time. So I'm going to leave you with this thought. Success in life is determined by the sum total of our choices. You can still choose to put success first. You can still choose to put success first. But the research and the data tells us that happiness is going to be elusive. Or you can choose happiness, optimism, and positivity. Sean Akers says something wonderful about happiness. He says, happiness without meaning is only pleasure. I am not talking about the hedonic pleasures of life. And you go back home and said, Don said I should be happy, and you start chowing down on Snickers bars. That's not what I'm saying. I'm talking about virtuous, community-driven, deep-seated, thoughtful happiness. If we pursue happiness, optimism, and positivity first, not only will we be happy, but success will follow. Thank you.